Imagine being literally the most famous man on Earth. You're universally beloved for making the whole world laugh, and then suddenly you find yourself a man without a country. Wild, right? Well, let's dive right into this. Today, we're exploring the deeply emotional, dramatic, and honestly triumphant final chapters of Charlie Chaplin's life. We're going to trace his painful exile from the United States, the profound peace he ended up finding in Europe, and his final, biting cinematic clapback. Oh, and just a quick note before we jump in. This video is for educational purposes and created under fair use principles. All right, let's get into it.
So, to understand exactly where this story begins, we've got to look at the breaking point. Take a look at this quote. In a powerful press release from 1952, Chaplin stated, "I have been the object of lies and propaganda by powerful reactionary groups who have created an unhealthy atmosphere in which liberal-minded individuals can be singled out and persecuted." You see, by the late 1940s and early 50s, the political climate in America had shifted completely. Red fever was running incredibly high. Anyone who didn't conform to strict ideological standards was viewed with intense suspicion. And Chaplin? He was an immigrant with progressive views who hadn't become a U.S. citizen, putting him squarely in the crosshairs of all this paranoia.
Things escalated with breathtaking speed. In 1947, he's subpoenaed by the House Un-American Activities Committee. But the true climax, that hit in September 1952. Chaplin had just boarded the RMS Queen Elizabeth, with his family, sailing to London for the premiere of his deeply personal film Limelight. Mid-journey, literally while they're crossing the Atlantic, the U.S. Attorney General revokes his re-entry permit. They told him he'd have to face a formal inquiry into his political views and moral behavior if he ever wanted to come back. Just like that, the gates of America were locked behind him.
Now, consider this staggering number. 1,900. That is the sheer number of pages in the exhaustive file the FBI compiled on Chaplin. 1,900 pages. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover had actually been investigating the star as far back as 1922. Over the decades, they scrutinized his personal life, interviewed his associates, and searched relentlessly for any evidence of communist sympathies. Biographers note it was a massive, highly orchestrated campaign of surveillance and targeted disinformation.
And all this relentless behind-the-scenes scrutiny soon bled into public life. During the absolute height of McCarthyism, we see aggressive campaigns pop up, like the American Legion urging movie theaters across the entire country to boycott Chaplin's latest film, Limelight. They claimed his work was this sustained assault on democratic ideals. The profound irony here, as historians point out, is that Limelight was a completely apolitical picture. It was just a nostalgic look back at London's Edwardian music halls. But, in that hysterical climate, facts mattered a lot less than fear.
Faced with all of this, Chaplin made a massive decision. Choosing not to contest the ban, he just turned his back on the hostility, the FBI files, and the bitter betrayal he felt from the country that had made him a star. Instead, he sought out a new horizon. And as we're about to see, he ended up finding this profound soul-healing peace over in Europe. That peace took a very specific, beautiful shape. In January 1953, the Chaplin family settled into their permanent home, the Manoir de Bonn. This place was a stunning 14-hectare, that's roughly 35-acre estate overlooking breathtaking Lake Geneva in Switzerland. When you read his letters from this period, Chaplin frequently describes his new surroundings as restful and serene. After decades of Hollywood pressure cookers and political witch hunts, he had finally found his sanctuary.
But the true foundation of that sanctuary? It wasn't the beautiful Swiss landscape. It was Una O'Neill. Now, Chaplin's early personal life was famously chaotic, filled with scandals and bitter divorces. But in Una, the daughter of playwright Eugene O'Neill, he found what he called his perfect love. She worshipped him, and he completely adored her. Despite all the controversies of his past, Una provided this absolute, unconditional love and a rock-solid foundation for the rest of his 34 years with her.
And let me tell you, his exile was definitely not some lonely, tragic isolation. Far from it. The place was absolutely bursting with life. Charlie and Una actually raised 8 children together over the course of 18 years. Manoir de Bonn was this bustling, joyful, energetic family home. It was an oasis where the world's most famous entertainer could step away from the spotlight and simply be a father and a husband, totally safely removed from the political crossfire.
But he was still Charlie Chaplin, right? He was still a filmmaker at heart. Which brings us to a fascinating question. How exactly does an exiled genius respond to a nation's paranoia? Because while he was thoroughly enjoying his family in Switzerland, the sting of how he was treated in America definitely lingered. And a true artist never really stays quiet for long. They speak through their work.
This leads us right to The Satirical Strike, A King in New York, his 1957 film. This was Chaplin's very first film made in exile. The premise is this brilliant piece of self-reflection. Chaplin cleverly casts himself as an exiled king who is overthrown in his own country and seeks asylum in the United States. He basically took the very real, very painful experiences of his own life and transformed them into a sharp, uncompromising cinematic satire.
And he really didn't hold back. Looking at the targets of his satire, Chaplin openly parodied the House Un-American Activities Committee. He ridiculed the sheer absurdity of Cold War paranoia and McCarthyism, pointing out how people were literally turning on their own neighbors. He even took aim at 1950s American consumerism, mocking everything from widescreen cinema to plastic surgery. It was a comprehensive critique of the political hypocrisy he felt had completely taken over his former home.
As the acclaimed playwright John Osborne put it perfectly, this was Chaplin's most bitter and most openly personal film. To underscore just how personal this project was, Chaplin actually cast his own son, Michael. Michael played a young boy whose parents are tragically targeted and persecuted by the FBI. Chaplin's own character in the film faces these absurd accusations of communism, directly mirroring the very headlines that had driven him out of Hollywood in the first place.
You can tell the wounds from his exile were still incredibly raw. In response, Chaplin orchestrated what was essentially an American blackout for the film. He was so deeply hurt by his treatment that he literally banned American journalists from attending the film's premiere in Paris. Plus, he outright refused to release A King in New York in the US. Because of this, it wouldn't actually be seen by American audiences until 1973, over 15 years after it was made.
So, as the 1950s turned into the 60s and then the 70s, a new generation started to look back at these cinematic pioneers. The political hysteria of the Red Scare slowly faded into history, replaced by this growing recognition of what America had actually lost. Which brings us to a really poignant question. Would the Tramp ever find reconciliation with the country that cast him out?
The answer to that is a resounding yes. In 1972, exactly 20 years after his re-entry permit was coldly revoked, Charlie Chaplin finally returned to the United States. He was invited back to accept an honorary Academy Award for his incalculable effect in making motion pictures the art form of the century. And you guys, the moment he stepped onto that stage, he was greeted with a legendary 12-minute standing ovation. It was this deeply emotional, tearful validation, proving once and for all that his art had outlasted his critics.
His final years were just filled with the highest honors the world could possibly offer. In 1975, he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II, officially becoming Sir Charles Spencer Chaplin. He spent his remaining time incredibly peacefully at his beloved Manoir de Bonn with Una. He spent his days reissuing his old films and composing beautiful, new musical scores for them. Surrounded by his family and recognized globally as a true master of cinema, he passed away quietly in his sleep on Christmas Day, 1977, at the age of 88.
I want to leave you with this final, beautiful thought from Chaplin himself. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Despite the political storms, the massive FBI investigations, and that painful exile, Chaplin's legacy really isn't one of bitterness. It is one of profound resilience, laughter, and an enduring belief in the human spirit. But it does leave us with something to think about. If the world's most famous entertainer could be silenced so quickly by fear, how safe is artistic freedom today? Well, that is all for this explainer. Please do not forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel, Famous Lives Bio. Until next time, keep learning.